The glitz and glamour of the world of celebrities is beyond your comprehension, isn't it? At the reunion, a woman made fun of me by saying, "Coming from an orphanage." I was raised in a parentless orphanage. She was aware of this and had always made fun of me. She went on to boast about her engagement to a wealthy heir, saying, "Compared to that, you're just pitiful. Raised in an orphanage with hardly any connections, completely alone in the world, aren't you?" I was starting to grow tired of her attitude when a stunning woman showed in. Ryan is my name. Despite being a typical 25-year-old male, I stand out from the crowd since I am parentless. For as long as I can remember, I have been residing at an orphanage. I don't want to know too much about my past. It seems that when I was just a year old, my parents perished in an accident. Although it's a depressing tale, I never felt the sadness because I can't recall their voices or faces. The personnel at the orphanage was occasionally stern and other times compassionate. All of us who grew up together were compassionate and raised correctly because of them. When I started elementary school and met friends outside the orphanage, I realized my situation was rare. At parent-teacher events, I was always the only one without parents. The teachers from the orphanage would attend sports days and concerts, but they came for all the kids, not just me. At my first sports day in the first grade, I felt lonely for the first time because I didn't have blood-related parents. Beyond that, growing up in an orphanage came with other downsides. "Hey, homeless, you don't have a home, do you?" Poor thing, some classmates teased when they learned about my circumstances. "I do have a home," I'd reply. "That's not a home. It's more like a kindergarten." To me, the orphanage where I was raised was definitely home. Since that was all I knew, I even thought it was normal. Besides, I had a family. A family without a mom and dad. What kind of family is that? I truly thought of the teachers and my peers as my family. Now, as an adult, I wonder if blood relations are really that important to being a family. Back then, I couldn't say anything and just froze. One classmate, Emma, was particularly harsh in her teasing. She was always bright and seemed to be the center of her group. "Look at this. Isn't it amazing?" I bought it on a trip to Hawaii. After vacations, she'd brag about family trips or staying at a relative's vacation home. "Look at this, Ryan. I bought it on a family trip. It was so fun." "Well, you probably wouldn't know about that," she'd say, mocking me. She seemed to feel superior by leveraging my upbringing. I didn't envy her travels. I had fun in the orphanage, but her attitude was frustrating. I told her many times to stop teasing me, but she never listened. Eventually, I got used to it and gave up. By some twist of fate, I ended up at the same high school as Emma. Even at 16 and 17, she continued to ridicule me. I hadn't told my new friends about the orphanage, but one day, Emma let the cat out of the bag. "Is it true you were raised in an orphanage?" one friend asked. "Yeah, actually, it's true," I replied. I wasn't hiding it out of shame. I just thought it would be a hassle to deal with more people like Emma. To my surprise, he didn't change his attitude. "What? That doesn't make any sense," he said, genuinely puzzled by my worries. His unexpected reaction stayed with me. Not everyone was like him. Besides Emma, others made heartless remarks. However, I noticed a pattern. When I showed some ability, their attitudes changed. I focused on studies and sports, believing they were my only path. My efforts paid off, and I achieved great results. Gradually, people began to gather around me, and I made close friends I still keep in touch with. Maybe Emma didn't like this, but I stopped caring. Ignoring her deprived her of satisfaction, and we drifted apart. As a working adult, I finally bid farewell to my strange connection with Emma. No one at work made fun of me for being from an orphanage. No one even asked about my family. Thanks to that, I felt comfortable and built a happy life. One day, after work, I checked my phone and found a long message. It was a reunion invitation from a high school friend. the same guy who treated me kindly despite knowing my background. He was a great friend, and I felt excited to see him after so long. It's been a while. I'll definitely attend, I replied, full of happiness. I immediately replied, and minutes later, I received a message. Thanks for confirming. Here are the details about the venue. Looking forward to it. I thought, this should do *. Wait a minute. A high school reunion * meant that Emma, who always had something nasty or boastful to say, would also be there. Realizing this made me a bit anxious, but I quickly remembered the fun memories outweighed the bad, and I looked forward to reuniting with friends. On the day of the reunion, when I arrived at the designated tavern, there were more people gathered than I expected. Hey, it's Ryan. Long time no see. Hey, long time. How've you been? Pretty good, I guess. I sat near the organizer, ordered a beer, and started chatting with a friend. So, what's up with you lately, Ryan? Just the usual. Work and life are pretty mundane. That's good to hear. He mentioned that some of our classmates weren't in the best of situations. Some had quit jobs at exploitative companies, while others were recovering from major injuries at their manual jobs. As we drank our beers, sharing updates and reminiscing, I heard a commotion from the back of the room. Well, Emma, that ring is amazing. Really? Where did you get it? The center of the excitement was none other than Emma. I couldn't see well from where I was, but apparently she was wearing a lavish, opulent ring. Actually, I was proposed to by my wealthy fiancé, she bragged, grinning widely. She flaunted her ring to her friends, and the women around her were getting excited. My close friends nearby mentioned it in a low voice. Man, a wealthy heir, huh? I wonder how much that ring costs. Then, Emma must have noticed that we were interested in her ring. She made her way over to us, pushing through the crowd with determination. You guys interested too? Look here, take a good look. She hadn't been asked, but she turned her left hand toward us, the gemstone dazzling in the light. I can go into details because it's his work. She began, then continued boasting about her boyfriend. He apparently makes $1 million a year, drives a luxury car, even owns a vacation home. He used to be a model and is incredibly kind and handsome. She was head over heels for him. I was almost impressed that she could say the last part without any embarrassment. Well, you guys are just in a completely different league, she added. Her unnecessary remark caused some irritation, but then she turned to me with a laugh. You can't even imagine the glitz and glamour of the celebrity world, can you? Coming from an orphanage, she sneered. She bragged about being born into the upper class, enabling her to marry into wealth. She spoke of her wonderful in-laws and how loved she felt by her fiancé, all with a deliberately unpleasant demeanor. Compared to that, you're just pitiful. Raised in an orphanage with hardly any connections, completely alone in the world, aren't you? I was just astounded by her ignorance. You seem to be under some misconception, I began to say, about to reveal the truth, but at that moment, I felt the warmth of someone's touch on my right arm. At the same time, a familiar, sweet scent of perfume wafted over. Excuse me, do you need something from my husband? Please, don't cause any trouble. It was Sophie, who intervened to restrain Emma. She is my fiancée. Oh, Sophie. You made it already. Yeah, I hurried to finish up my work. She had an unavoidable job and was supposed to be late, but she apparently finished early, determined to join the reunion. We smiled at each other, surprising those around us. Husband? Wait, what? Ryan is Sophie's? No way, man. You really did it. Our close friends reacted loudly. Seeing their response, Sophie clung to me even tighter. Why? Why would someone like you? Emma's expression was one of disbelief, her face twisted as though she had just stepped on a bitter bug. It was a dramatic change from the proud demeanor Emma had just moments ago. Sophie had been famous for her beauty since high school. Not just students from our school, but even those from other schools who heard rumors about her came to confess their feelings. But she herself didn't seem interested in such things. She politely brushed off everyone's advances. Being the daughter of a big corporation's owner, she was like an unattainable flower to me. She always had a chauffeur for school commutes and was accompanied by a bodyguard-like driver. Even those who admired Sophie could only muster the courage to speak to her from afar. Our close relationship started with our jobs. The company where I got a job offer turned out to be owned by Sophie's father. You're Ryan, right? From the same high school. Remember me? She approached me one lunch break a few days into the job. Sophie, of course, I remember you. I knew the CEO had the same last name, Sullivan, as Sophie, but I never imagined he was her father. Miraculously, we ended up working together. We often found ourselves collaborating on various tasks, working on major projects, and gradually growing closer. Ryan, you're doing quite well. I hear your reputation has reached our ears. Thank you. It's an honor. I was just trying to work like everyone else, I said, but maybe with Sophie's support, my achievements kept piling up, and I somehow became favored by the executives. Even the CEO began to take an interest in me. Then one day, after work, I happened to meet Sophie. Ryan, do you have a moment? Sure, I'm free. I followed her, curious about what she wanted, and we ended up at a stylish bar. It didn't seem like a work-related conversation, and then she said something I never expected. Ryan, I've fallen for you. Her words, though familiar, didn't make sense to me at first. Wait, what do you mean? I want us to be together. I was beyond surprised, completely in disbelief. I never thought she, whom I considered out of my league, would say such a thing. But should I accept her offer? I was hesitant. Thank you, I'm happy, but I definitely don't think I'm someone who matches you. Orphan with no parents. I believe someone more fitting should stand beside a lady from a large corporation. I'm really happy, but I'm not the right person for you. That's not true. You're great, Ryan. Even my dad likes you. Thank you, but still, it's not right. My feelings of inferiority, stemming from being raised in an orphanage, prevented me from accepting her affection. From that day, there was an awkwardness between Sophie and me, or so I thought, until one day. Ryan, how about dinner tonight? Ryan, do you want to watch a movie together on our next day off? Ryan, I got us tickets to the theme park. She persistently stuck to it, almost to the point of being pushy. Her earnestness touched my heart, and I finally shook off my inferiority complex to start dating her. Before we knew it, things progressed rapidly, and recently we got engaged. Now, we're preparing for our wedding next month amidst our work schedules. When Sophie explained how everything unfolded, our friends clapped and celebrated. Meanwhile, Emma looked frustrated, contorting her face in dismay. Ryan isn't alone in the world. I'll make him happy. Besides, the smallest unit of family is a couple. A couple is, after all, two unrelated individuals by blood, right? Sophie questioned. But Emma just clenched her fists and groaned. Then Sophie continued. So, happiness has nothing to do with blood relations. You kept mentioning that I was raised in an orphanage, but what does that matter? It doesn't affect our happiness now, does it? Emma finally reached her limit under Sophie's barrage. She grabbed her belongings and stormed out of the tavern, glaring at us with a demonic expression. Sometime after that incident, Sophie and I attended a party we were invited to for work. I was wondering what a simple employee like me was doing at such an event, but according to Mr. Sullivan, the CEO, you might be the future CEO, so attend and learn. That seemed a bit premature. The man himself was probably somewhere in the venue, networking with people from various companies. Ryan, there's Mr. Bennett. Oh right, Let's go say hello. In the crowd, I spotted the president of Bennett Construction, one of our major clients. Mr. Bennett, it's been a while. Sophie greeted the tall, intimidating man. Ah, Miss Sullivan, likewise, it's been a while. He replied with a gentle and soft voice, contrary to his appearance. I had met him a few times for Sophie, and I was always surprised by the contrast between his looks and demeanor. As we chatted with Mr. Bennett, a voice called out from behind us. Dad, I've finished greeting everyone. The voice seemed directed at Mr. Bennett. That's good, Julian. Networking is important. Use these connections in the future. Commenting on his having a son, I looked at the face of this Julian, who seemed vaguely familiar. He seemed to have his own thoughts about me too, as we faced each other with a strange atmosphere. Nice to meet you. I'm Ryan. As I introduced myself, his eyes widened in recognition. Julian, is that you? Ryan, it is you, isn't it? Julian, you know him? Asked Mr. Bennett, looking puzzled at us. He probably never imagined we had a connection. We were in the orphanage together in the past, Julian replied softly. Upon hearing this, Mr. Bennett smiled warmly and said, Is that so? Is that so? It seems he holds no prejudice against those who grew up in an orphanage. I've heard from Mr. Sullivan that you're an excellent son-in-law. If he says so, you must be working hard. I respect that. I was overwhelmed by such unexpected praise. Julian left the orphanage when he was about to enter elementary school. He, like me, didn't know his parents, but fortunately, someone came to take him in. That someone was Mr. Bennett. Hey, Ryan, let's play tag. I'll be it. But Julian, you run so fast, I can't escape. Ready, set, go. Julian often invited me, a year younger, to play with him. It felt somewhat forceful, but I enjoyed playing too. Of course, Julian and I have no blood relation, yet we always thought of each other as true brothers. I cried when he was adopted. I deeply mourned the loss of my closest family. Nearly 20 years later, I never imagined we would reunite like this. It seems Mr. Bennett adopted Julian because they couldn't have children. He had a physical issue and was concerned about the company's succession, so he opted for adoption. As he told me, because of his experience, he doesn't see being raised in an orphanage as something special. There's no blood relation, but I'm grateful for being raised well, Julian said. The room filled with smiles at his words, and Mr. Bennett seemed a bit shy. Julian continued, I'll support my parents from now on. Julian aims to be a worthy successor, repaying the kindness of being raised. My brother, who was suddenly separated from me in our childhood, is now living happily like this. Knowing this, I felt as happy as if it were about my own life. Then, a woman appeared, her voice I remembered from a recent unpleasant encounter. Julian, sorry to keep you waiting. Wait, why are you two here? It was Emma, dressed in an overly flashy dress. This is more like my line. Why are you here? Sophie stepped between Emma and me. Since the reunion, she seemed wary of Sophie. What do you mean, why can't a fiancé attend a party? Emma sarcastically responded, clinging to Julian's arm, as if showing off. So, the wealthy fiancé was Julian. Our strange connection with Emma was almost ironic. As I was thinking this, Julian asked curiously, Wait, Emma, you know them. These two are my high school classmates, Emma explained in a manner not fitting her elegant appearance. Really? That's a surprise. I have a connection with Ryan too. He's like a brother to me. We just reunited today after about 20 years. Hearing Julian's story, Emma frowned. It seemed less like she was angry and more like she couldn't comprehend his words. Oh, like a brother. But Ryan's just a pitiable orphan, right? Why would you, Julian? Well, Emma, that's harsh, Julian said, shocked by her demeaning words. I told you I was adopted before. I was in the same orphanage as Ryan, he spoke sadly, and Emma stood there, shaking and flustered. Mr. Bennet, watching sharply, seemed the most critical of Emma's behavior. His stern face when glaring was so intimidating that even I, who wasn't the target, felt unnerved. Emma, do you have a prejudice against being raised in an orphanage? Well, Emma stammered. I wanted to say something too, but was lost for words in the terrible atmosphere. Then Sophie spoke up. She used to tease him back in high school. Even at the recent reunion, she said terrible things to Ryan. That's enough, Emma, Sophie said, her tone cold. Emma tried to make excuses, but cowered under the cold stares from Mr. Bennet and Julian. After a silence, Emma finally spoke, tears in her eyes. It's not that. It's just... Her voice was so faint, unlike her usual loud, boastful self. I was just jealous. Emma had explained, her voice trembling. Emma's parents were married to each other, and she was her father's child from a previous marriage. When she started elementary school, her parents had a son. They only doted on my brother. They never showed me any love. I received food, clothing, and school supplies, though it was more an afterthought. She did go on the family trips, but the way her brother was treated compared to her was like night and day. She felt unloved, as if she wasn't their mutual child. I wasn't abused, but I wasn't even allowed to interact with my brother. I never knew what family or siblings were supposed to be like. Then she met me. She learned from somewhere that I was raised in an orphanage, without a blood-related family. She had a family, but no place in her home. I had no family, but a comforting place. Seeing me, who had what she lacked, she couldn't help but attack. That's why I pretended to be cheerful and exaggerated my boasts. I just wanted to fit in at school. Emma lined up boasts and lies, creating a circle where she was celebrated, desperately gathering friends and seeking her place. Yet, the orphan with nothing was now smiling with friends. Seeing me trusted and respected, her jealousy grew uncontrollable. But you never cared, she said, her voice shaking. I ignored her for convenience, but to her, it seemed like I had grown up. It's not that I didn't care. Her obsession and noise seemed pitiful, and she eventually stopped attacking. So why did you say such things to Ryan at the reunion? Sophie asked angrily. Emma, on the verge of tears, whispered, I got carried away. Julian, who had heard all this, suddenly proposed. He even had her ring, and then I said those things. Her tears smeared her makeup. Ignoring that, she suddenly apologized to me. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for everything, Emma. Her apology seemed sincere, not just words, but truly from her heart. But how could I easily forgive over a decade of harassment with just one apology? Emma, I'm really happy now, being adopted by my father. But being in the orphanage wasn't a misfortune. I had many friends with similar experiences. The orphanage housed children from various backgrounds. We understood and supported each other, living happily. There was some loneliness without parents, but it wasn't solitary or miserable, right? I smiled a bit at Julian, who had spoken for me, and turned my gaze back to Emma. She apologized to me again, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation. Emma, I'm sorry. I just can't sort out my feelings right now, so I need some time to think about it. She looked a bit surprised at Julian's words, but didn't make a scene or reject him. I'll call a cab for you, so please go home and think it over, Julian said, his tone firm. Although it must have been tough for him to say that, he probably did this considering that the disdain for being raised in an orphanage wasn't just towards him. Emma quietly said, "Okay," without any further fuss, and left the scene. Later, Julian informed me that the engagement with Emma had been called off. It seems she was the one who proposed ending it. He still doesn't seem to completely dislike her. Indeed, considering Emma's family circumstances, there's room for sympathy. That's what I thought, but Sophie had a different view. I won't sympathize at all, Her family background and her continuous harassment are separate issues. We shouldn't pity her until it's clear she's really repented and changed. Well, you might be right. By the way, Sophie, you're kind of tough on Emma, aren't you? I was concerned about this since the reunion and the recent party where Sophie was noticeably cold. I asked her if there was any particular reason for this, to which she replied a bit sulkily. It's just a rivalry. A rivalry? I asked. In high school, I thought she liked you. I always assumed she was being snide to get your attention, Sophie said shyly. That means she had been watching me since then. The fact that Sophie, admired by everyone, had such thoughts about me was quite a surprise. Really, I felt both surprised and happy. I found Sophie even more endearing. Remember at the reunion you said happiness doesn't need to be related by blood? That made me really happy, I said. The fact that Sophie became part of my family and that her family has been so good to me. For me, that was a great happiness. I think the bond is what's important in a family. Yeah, I think so too, Sophie smiled. Let's never forget this. We both laughed when we said that. Since I had no family, our wedding was a simple ceremony held in a chapel with only the two of us. Because of business ties, the subsequent reception was intended to be lavish. Julian and buddies from high school were also planning to attend. I vowed to God, Sophie, and myself that I would always treasure my family and strengthen our relationship after taking my vows. I want to be a proud person for everyone who helped me along the way. As we vowed for the future, divine light poured through the stained glass.